Okay, so we're going to start our next program by Cian. The title is Taming of 500,000 Lines of SaltStack Configuration.
Hi, guys. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Hopefully the interpreters can hear me well enough. My name's Cian, and I'm a senior software engineer at Cloudflare. As part of the platform configuration team, I'm responsible for the software and patterns that engineers across Cloudflare in general use to configure their products for our end users. Today, I'll talk about the uniqueness of the Cloudflare network from a platform configuration perspective, the challenges we face, and what we're doing to make it better for our colleagues and our customers. This is a bit of a walkthrough of a real life example with some interesting stories along the way. For those of you who don't know Cloudflare, hopefully you do, but if you don't, we like to describe ourselves as a connectivity cloud, providing a backbone for a safe and fast global internet. But more importantly, as a company to help build with a mission to help build a better internet. From providing security for those who need it to championing the best practices and establishing new practices, standards across the internet. Cloudflare achieves this mission every day by building and constantly expanding a network capable of serving billions of requests a day, no matter what's thrown at it. This capability has come with an architecture with two key attributes that make it unique from a configuration management perspective. Firstly, the Cloudflare network uses Anycast to advertise IP addresses for ingress. This means that a single IP address is announced by multiple machines all over the world. It allows for lower latency and improved DDoS mitigation, but it also requires us to have a largely homogeneous fleet of servers. Basically, as any server could be selected to serve a request, the entirety of Cloudflare needs to be configured in a relatively consistent manner. Secondly, the Cloudflare network leverages the performance and configurability of a bare metal server to provide the capacity and capabilities that our customers require. This means two things. Firstly, that every aspect of a server, all the way from hardware components up to the application lifecycle of individual products, must be configurable in a cohesive manner. And secondly, containerization, which is the answer to many configuration management problems these days, is generally unavailable to us. Now, since the beginning, we've been using Salt, an infrastructure as code tool, more of an ecosystem that was adopted for its dynamism and flexibility when Cloudflare was initially growing. The Salt ecosystem is made up of two components: a configuration language, Salt, that defines the desired state of infrastructure, and a set of executables, SaltStack, that perform the actual configuration of that infrastructure. It is Salt, the configuration language, that my colleagues and I have written more than 500,000 lines of. That's the 500,000 lines of configuration that I was talking about at the start there. We've done this to precisely define how every bare metal server at Cloudflare works, how it's deployed, and how it's done in a homogeneous manner. Now, this configuration base covers literally everything at Cloudflare, from the RAID configuration of hard drives all the way up to the package dependencies between the applications that serve our actual traffic. Every month, it receives hundreds of updates from colleagues across the entire company. Now, at this point, you may be wondering why I mentioned taming in the title of this talk. Taming implies that something is wild, whereas the exact opposite is true at Cloudflare. Our configuration base is exacting. It's provided the precision to build one of the most complex systems in the world. While this is true, Cloudflare is ever evolving, and the need for updates to our system is constant. Performance must be optimized, new products must be launched, and existing systems must be maintained. Over time, the configuration base has grown to match the complexity of Cloudflare. However, the difficulty of updating it safely and efficiently, and by proxy Cloudflare, has grown even more quickly. Changes to our system have grown to depend on tribal knowledge, toilsome manual testing, and a resource and time-intensive approach to production resiliency. We know that this will not continue to scale, and it is this, the growing difficulty of making change to Cloudflare, that we are in the process of taming. within our configuration base. Fortunately, acknowledging that this problem existed has resulted in sufficient investment and attention for us to effectively start. While we know there's a lot of work to do, we have made a good start, and this is what I'm going to be talking to you guys about a little bit about today. So the first thing we did is we identified two key issues within our configuration base that were making it more and more difficult to introduce change. Number one was the configuration base was responsible for too much. There wasn't a clear understanding of what should be in there and what just was. To have any chance of simplifying it, we needed to have a way to determine what could stay and what should go. To do this, we defined and socialized two concepts internally: state enforcement and change management. We're now aligning on an understanding of their differences and how they impact what should and shouldn't be in our code configuration base. The goal of state enforcement is to ensure that a specified state is enforced as accurately and as responsibly as possible. This means interpreting our configuration base, consulting data sources, and performing enforcement actions to achieve the expected state in a reliable and performant manner. The goal of change management, on the other hand, is ensuring that changes to our configuration can be made in a controlled, observable, and targeted manner. This means mapping our systems and infrastructure and providing an interface to abstract the complexity of introducing a change to them granularly. Just to be clear here, we're talking about an infrastructure that spans the entire globe in more than 300 cities. So introducing change and making that easier for our engineers when they're focused on individual products which are used on every single server independently is a really important and difficult challenge that we're facing. Now, these definitions and the distinction between them have allowed us to reevaluate our understanding of our configuration base and what it should contain. What we've got to is redefining our configuration base as a structured way to interface between our state enforcement and change management tooling. Practically, this means that our configuration base will no longer be both the definition of the state of our infrastructure as well as the primary mechanism for introducing change to that infrastructure. Instead, it will contain a reference to the where and a reference to the what, but not the what itself. Highlighting this distinction has been important. It has been important internally as it elevates the uniqueness and challenges of change management at Cloudflare to a first-class concept. This means it is incorporated at the design stage of systems and products rather than the deployment or productionization stages. While SaltStack will continue to deliver our state enforcement functionality, we have been developing change management tooling internally. The initial tooling we built is foundational. It provides granular control over the introduction of change to our systems at Cloudflare specifically and our network. This end-to-end change management experience codifies not only the layout of our infrastructure, but also the expectations and best practices for resiliency. More interestingly, however, these tools provide a solid base of change management primitives. These building blocks can be combined into frameworks of best practice for core use cases. Once composed, these so-called paved roads for commonly needed configuration management outcomes have allowed Cloudflare to systematically improve our approach to change management. With this advancement, we've been able to scale support for our changes to our system ahead of the growing complexity of Cloudflare. Now, on to the second point. We also realized that even with a right-sized configuration base, responsible for only what it should be, it was not being maintained and developed with the level of sophistication and structure that was needed for a project of its size. This mismatch stemmed from the fact that the original developers of the Salt ecosystem did not have our configuration base in mind when they designed it. The maintainers have traditionally had an unopinionated approach to configuration management. They preferred to offer a range of capabilities, allow the users to select and compose them how they wished, but put no constraints on that. This approach led to architectural choices and tooling that were suitable for when we initially adopted SaltStack, but haven't grown with the pace of complexity and sophistication that we need. With this mismatch, we were developing and maintaining a project, so our configuration base, with an approach that was not well matched to our needs. Having considered, but ultimately rejected, migrating off of SaltStack, for anyone who has thought about a major migration like this, imagine it multiplied by 100. We instead focused on the ways we could develop the tooling and structure we required by ourselves. Although engagement with the SaltStack community provided some help, it was the identification of similarities between our configuration base and traditional software engineering that helped the most. Once this alignment had been established, we were able to map aspects of our configuration base to traditional software engineering analogs. With these analogs, we could immediately access a significantly broader and deeper range of knowledge from the wider software engineering community. This alignment with design patterns and processes that better matched our scale allowed us to identify anti-patterns, validate some of our design decisions, and leverage standardized language to talk about our configuration base internally. Amongst the broader alignment we established, two key examples stand out to me. The first example is that we classified our pillar as a global variable. For those who are less familiar with SaltStack, the pillar is effectively a dictionary of information that spans the entirety of the application of state. So you can write information to it, you can read information from it, you can amend things. Everyone's information is all in one place, and it affects everything across the entirety of our application management. It's just a massive dictionary, basically. So what we took from that was that while a global is a valuable concept and can have its place in engineering, it's also a fairly blunt tool for solving problems that usually have much more specific solutions. Highlighting this not only told us that we were doing something that was an anti-pattern in a lot of the rest of the industry, but it also gave us a list of more specific solutions to the requirements our pillar usage was already solving for us. As we identified and migrated our existing pillar usage to alternatives, we were not only reducing the reliance on this bad mechanism, but we were also incorporating the effective knowledge, the collective knowledge of the wider engineering community. In addition to the adoption of these solutions, establishing the pillar as a global as an analog for the pillar was valuable for our internal understanding and our standardized language. A global variable is a very well-known concept that engineers will have heard about in college, will have heard about as they work in their careers, and may have even experienced when they deal with production incidents. For those that continue to use the pillar, they could do so with a full awareness of the benefits and also the drawbacks that it gave. But more practically, engineers were using this awareness, or still are, to develop mitigations and lead investigations into issues that they've seen. Ultimately, this awareness has led to a cultural shift in the way that we engage with the pillar and the way that we continue to develop our relationship with it as we go forward. The second example that I wanted to highlight was that we classified our primary approach to testing as a form of systems testing. This then highlighted the fact that our approach to testing was having a direct impact on the structure of our configuration base. In general, for configuration management, tooling and patterns is focused on the evaluation and the validation of the final output. This results in tests that cover the entirety of the configuration base from end to end. Our approach to testing wasn't an exception, and we found that we were heavily reliant on automated and manual system tests for the entirety of our configuration base. While this approach to testing was initially successful, it became less effective as we had more contributors. Over time, with a focus on systems tests that exercise the entirety of our configuration base and favored the end result alone, the structure of the configuration base itself became a secondary concern. This loss of focus resulted in tight coupling that made our configuration base much more difficult to work with. After we identified this fact, or anti-pattern, I guess you can call it, we looked to the wider software development industry or community, and we identified unit testing as an effective antidote to our over-reliance on systems testing. In general, it rewards investments in structure with a reduction in testing costs. So unit tests, the more structured your code is, the faster your unit tests will run, the easier it will be for you to write unit tests. And so you're going to have a better time than people who rely on systems tests, which are expensive and harder to maintain. As a final sort of wrap up, both of these examples stood out to me because they treat infrastructure as code. So it's recognizing that as you build out a configuration base with infrastructure as code as the sort of underpinning feature, it is still code at the end of the day, and you should look to the broader software engineering industry, find alignment with that, and then look for analogs and help and advice from an industry that is 20 to 30 years more mature in some cases than configuration management platforms. As I wrap up, I want to say thank you for the time today. And if there's any questions, I'll take them now. Perfect. Thanks, guys.